Hi guys, I am Michele and a few days ago we had a live session on YouTube with Gunnar Biniasch, shaper of Indiana in Waterman since a lot of time. This interview has been very good. You made a lot of questions and Gunnar replied to all of you. I think that it has been really useful because it helped us to understand a lot about hydrofoil, a lot about the development of this product, but also the behavior in the water. We spoke about size, aspect ratio, and construction and material. So I selected, in my opinion, the best question that you made, and in the following minutes you will find the answer from Gunnar. We started speaking about aspect ratio of an hydrofoil, and the first question is built about which is the best AR to wingfoil in the waves. Would you recommend an high aspect foil around 10-11 for wingfoil wave condition, or foil around 7-5-8 like the marlin? Which choice will be the best? Why I think Resh asked this because I think you posted some images and you were riding a barracuda in the waves.
Yeah. So it really depends on your riding style and how you like to ride. Like I said, the biggest difference between the marlin and the barracuda, is the glide, first of all. Yeah? The barracuda has a lot more glide than the marlin does. Yeah. And so it works especially well in sort of like rounder waves, like sort of more of the swell riding, which actually is like what 90% of people do on like Europe and even on Fuerteventura. A lot of our wave conditions, especially around summer, are on large swells that don't actually break. So having a very glidey foil, high performance foil, works a lot better for those type of conditions. And I personally like that sort of really snappy, sort of progressive carving. Yeah. Whereas the marlin has this very linear carving, which allows for, let's say, a little bit like safer riding in bigger waves. So if it's actually a very large breaking wave, or actually it's like close in waves like shore break, like you get in the North Sea and so on, the marlin excels in those type of conditions where you can really go for your turns and really push the foil hard and not have to worry about it kicking or sort of accelerating out of your sort of comfort zone. So it really depends if you like sort of that type of riding, which the marlin is good for, yeah, which is sort of that breaking wave, always under power, sort of more windsurf style wave riding. The marlin is perfect for you. If you're more like me, who likes sort of this sort of more glidey and then having that progressive carve in the turn, then it's more for you. So there's choice for both types of riding. Generally here on Fuerteventura, we typically get these sort of larger swells and that type of conditions. So typically most people here ride high aspect foils from all the different brands. Whereas if you look towards like the North Sea and so on, like Germany and so on, or also on the lakes when it's really windy, people tend to like the marlin for those type of conditions because it just fits quite nicely into that. Then we spoke about how the thickness of an hydrofoil influences the behavior on the water and the maximum speed.
Next question. Wingfoil advice. Thanks for all your answer. At the same volume, compare the two front wings with the same AR and span, but just 1/3 4 mm thinner. Which will be better in terms of speed, start, agility, and glide?
This question is actually amazing because it explains one of my like little annoyances with, let's say, the industry. That one of the things that annoys me a little bit about the whole foiling industry is that surface areas become a sort of standard to define size, and essentially through size, the light wind performance of a front wing, which if you look at the math is completely wrong. Like that's why if you take a high aspect wing and you compare it to low aspect wing, the surface area means nothing. You can't compare 1,000 square meter low aspect wing with 1,000 square meter high aspect wing. The 1,000 square meter high aspect wing has hell of a lot more lift than that low aspect for the given speed of the foil traveling through the water or the air. So the one variable in that lift equation, the lift coefficient equation, is the thickness, or it's defined in the equation as shape. So small changes. I actually did the math a couple of years back. There's a nice Excel sheet somewhere online where if you double the surface area of a front wing, you can get the same additional lift effect by just increasing the thickness of the foil by 10%.
Okay.
Yeah. So like a 10% increase in thickness in shape will actually give you almost the same as doubling the surface area of the foil in sort of the actual lift coefficient. So let's say the surface area sort of scales very linear, whereas the shape scales like exponentially. So like a 3/4 of a millimeter thinner will give you, let's say, slightly more speed. Yeah. But if you mean with start agility, essentially like the stall speed, it will cost you a little bit on stall speed, so it will take a little bit more to get going. But it will also increase the glide at speed. It will increase the glide speed, which means you need to be going faster. But it will also glide at a faster speed. It will sort of cruise faster. So everything will sort of feel faster. What it typically won't affect is the top end speed, if you're only changing thickness. Yeah. And there's also quite a limit of changing the thickness without changing the chord. So typically, if you want to make a faster, thinner foil, you reduce the chord to reduce the thickness of the profile. If you just squish the profile, there's a lot of profiles out there which absolutely hate that. And then they will start doing weird things. You'll get ventilations and vibrations and so on. It's because you're actually changing the complete profile shape by squeezing the profile thickness. So what you typically want to do, is typically why it's also easier to go higher aspect, is as you shrink the chord length, that profile thickness goes down for that profile. So if you want to use the same profile and get thinner, you have to go higher aspect, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Then we spoke about shimming between the board and the mast, and between the fuselage of the hydrofoil and the stabilizer.
Angle shims between the board and the foil. Make it sense?
Yeah.
Wait, because I had also my question. Shimming of stabilizer.
Yeah.
How to shim and how to understand which is the best shim, except from reading the technical data of the hydrofoil.
Okay. So let's start with plate shim. Sort of like the angle shim between board and foil, as we plate shim as we know it. It is great for compensating for a board that's typically doesn't have enough tail rocker or too much tail rocker for the foil. Tail rocker is essentially that last curve. Basically, if you look at the middle of the board and you curve it back towards the tail, that's your tail rocker. Imagine if you have that board flat on the ground, and then you can rock the board, and that's the back part. Now, if your board doesn't have enough tail rocker, there's not enough of a delta between your board and the front wing of the foil, which means typically you want about 1 or 2 degrees delta between the nose of the board and the foil. So essentially, if the board is flat on the ground or the water, your foil should be pointing slightly down. The front wing should be pointing slightly down. Okay, why is that? Because essentially, as you rock up the board, you're bringing that foil up until its actual natural angle of attack. Yeah? Now, the way foils work, and there's a reason you need plate shims, is that the angle of the front wing will always be the same. There's a natural angle of attack, or the natural angle of incidence, as it's known in aerodynamic terms. That front wing is always going to fly at that angle of attack as it's set relative to the angle of the stabilizer. You have a delta or difference between angle of attack between the front wing and the downward angle of attack of the stabilizer. Now, if your nose of your board feels like it's hanging, that's because it's too flat, which means that actually when the foil is flying essentially a little bit nose up, your board is pointing down towards it. It means because everything is too flat. Now, if you add a plate shim increase that angle. Now, as that foil comes up, it's actually also lifting the nose of the board up. Yeah. So by having that delta, you have that sort of nice front foot pressure. So if you feel that no matter what you do, where you position the foil, is that your front foot feels too low and it's hanging, you need to increase that delta. So you need to put a positive plate shim there, which will angle foil and board apart. If you have the opposite feeling, that I've always got way too much foot pressure, it feels like the board is flying nose up all the time, that means you typically have too much delta, and that's why you would have the opposite. You'd have a plate shim that reduces that delta between the two. Now, this is something that cannot be corrected by shimming the stabilizer. Okay, what shimming the stabilizer does is essentially decide like I say, the pitch resistance of the foil first of all. So if you imagine if you didn't have the stabilizer, you have the pitching moment of the front wing, which means it'll fly perfectly well at slow speeds, and then eventually it hits a certain speed and it'll just go, it'll angle down. What the stabilizer does, and that's why it's the opposite way round, so the profile is reversed, is that as the front wing starts to pitch down, this will actually get a higher angle of attack and will push the foil back into a neutral position. So it's always like a little bit of a balancing act between your front wing and the stabilizer, sort of keeping everything there. Typically, the higher the angle of attack of the stabilizer, the stiffer everything gets. And it can actually also create a bit more lift because you're adding like more natural angle of attack to the front wing. So the more this is set, let's say, angled down in flying mode, which is actually increasing the angle of attack of the stabilizer, the more it's going to push up against the front wing, the faster you go. So typically, if you actually have too much angle of attack, you'll always feel that it's quite neutral at slow speed. But as you increase in your speed, that front wing is going to start raising its angle of attack, which gives you this very sort of exponential increase in front foot pressure. That typically means if that's happening, you need to reduce the angle of attack of your stabilizer. That's also why typically for pump foiling, we tend to use negative shims, which like decrease the angle of attack of the stabilizer, which gives you sort of this very easy to pump thing. Because there we actually like having a very unloaded front foot. We like to load our back foot a bit more and allow the foil to glide. Another cool effect of reducing the angle of attack, obviously, of the stabilizer, it gets less draggy. Okay. Now, here's where it gets a bit complicated. Going fast, however, with a foil that has not enough stabilizer angle is extremely difficult. That's essentially because if you really want to go fast, let's say plus 30 knots, you need stability. The foil needs to be handleable. You need that sort of stiffness, that that foil's not moving around everywhere for every little sort of pressure change that's happening. So that essentially, if you're looking at sort of racing gear, the angle of attack of the stabilizer is closer to like 3 degrees. Yeah. Whereas if you look at pump foils, there it's closer to 1 degree or even 0 degrees. Yeah. So there actually may be more drag on the whole system by having more angle, but because you can control it better and you're getting that power back to overcome that drag through your wing or through your kite, you can actually ride with more angle on your stabilizer.
Clear. And regarding the shimming of the board, how do you, is there an empirical way to understand which shim do you have to mount, or is just a trial and error on the wall?
It's matter of taste.
Okay.
Yeah, but I typically tell people, look, start with like a 2 degree shim, because that's somewhere nice in the middle. And it's also ask them, what's the problem? Do you feel that your nose is too low? Is your nose too high? Typically, if I see them ride, I can typically tell immediately, it's like, okay, your nose is too high. Get a negative shim on there. It'll flatten everything off. We'll start with 2, and then we'll see how it feels. And that's the other way around. If we see that the nose is always hanging on the board, then we put a positive shim on there and say, okay, like how does it feel now? And then we'll go from there. Like 1 degree is quite a lot already, like in a change. So
clear.
But typically, if you have a board like an old, pre 2022, not 23 board, sorry, They all had, like, with the exception of the Indiana ones, they all had like a completely flat tail. There was no tail rocker whatsoever in those boards. Those typically need a positive plate shim. Yeah, I sold a lot when I had the shop, especially for sap foil, foils, and using it with duotone boards, for example, back in like 2022, 2023.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Clear.
typically the typical reason you would have to have that.
Okay. And regarding the shim between the board and the foil, we were speaking about it also last week when we had here Max Galtarossa, the shaper of Kite Loose. And we were speaking about this topic, and someone from the audience told us, and I agree with him, that it's not really easy to find some board shims on the market. It seems that typically you need to create something by 3D printer or ask to your friend that has a 3D printer. Why this? Could not be interesting to have some board shims available widely.
I think the main thing is timing. The market for that's really gone because it's changed. Like, okay, 2021, 2022, like early 2023, there were like only about 2 or 3 brands making WINGFOIL boards, proper ones with tail rocker, normal scoop rocker lines, where they would work with all foils, and yeah, that's it. But nowadays, since 2023, even the big brands like Duotone, Starboard, Armstrong, whatever, they've all sort of started making wing boards with tail rocker. So now all the foils work. So it's very rare now to actually need the plate shim.
Okay, clear.
It's then it just comes down to somebody really likes that high front foot pressure, or they have an old foil, like I could say that's combining let's say back then it was Fanatic foil with a Indiana board. There you'd actually need to have a negative, because then you'd actually have too much angle. So that's the only reason now. So there's not so much demand for a product like that.
And then we start speaking about the construction, and in particular the new monoblock construction that is present in some of the hydrofoil on the market, and in particular in the new hydrofoil series from Indiana.
The monoblock construction is, let's say, the best compromise out of performance and sort of ease of use. I should just grab one from behind here.
Wait a second, I will share full screen you. Wait a second. Here it is. Bye.
Okay, so as you can see, it's actually the glider itself. You have your front wing that's integrated into the front part of the fuselage, and then you have the tail section. The tail and the front part are connected here. If you see, there's an M6 screw that goes through, it connects both parts, so you can just keep them in one part when you're just keep it in your car traveling. And when the mast is fixed, you actually have 2 M8 screws, which actually again hold those 2 pieces strongly together. So you get a very rigid connection. And then also being able to control the thickness of the fairing section between the fuselage and the wing. Fairing is what we call essentially this radius here that you have on those 4 corners. For a really large wing, you want that area to be bigger. So really reinforce that area, because there's a lot of force here when you're pumping and turning, jumping. But on a smaller span wing, you don't need that much reinforcement here, which if you have like a fuselage that's separated from the front wing, you are limited to that surface area of that connection point where the screws are going through. Whereas here we can really choose, like smaller wings, we can really make it thin, very, very streamlined. And for the bigger wings where we need that connection to be really strong to take that pressure, we can go larger. So you end up with a very sort of customized design for every type of wing you have on here. What we also changed this year was our flat mount stabilizer system. The previous model of fuselage, we had like an actual cutout here where the stabilizer was sitting a little bit more inside, a bit more flush. But that we found that this way we could actually streamline it actually more by bringing the connection closer in, and we could work with sort of flatter shim systems and so on. While we wanted to also make it available, if you looked at our aluminum fuselages from the previous years, we had like multiple screw holes here, which we couldn't have by having that sort of cutout. So now we have the same option of having multiple fuselage lengths on the carbon fuselages too by using this system.
We spoke also about the best aspect ratio of an hydrofoil for a beginner.
Can you please explain to us which are the typical uses of the various products that are present in the catalog?
Okay, so let's start from the top. There we have the Barracudas. The Barracudas are high performance, high aspect front wings. High aspect front wings are typically good for, let's say, high performance winging, essentially racing, and however also glide. What makes, let's say, high aspect foil isn't automatically, let's say, the fastest on the water, but what it is the most efficient. You have the least amount of drag, plus you have the most amount of glide. Typically, that's why if you look at a sailplane, like a high performance sailplane glider, it'll always have like a super high aspect wing, because there you have the largest amount of lift to drag ratio. So a high aspect front wing for a hydrofoil will always essentially be the best for pumping performance, glide performance, and also like essentially the least resistance through the water. Now, the Barracuda is quite interesting in that fact that it covers not only winging, but it's also good for advanced pump foilers, for downwinding, and if it's good for downwinding, it's good for para-winging. And then the small size, like the Barracuda S, is actually a very high performance front wing that will work for all your racing applications too. So for wingfoil racing, kitefoil racing, that's the size class that it's in, so that can be used for that. And also for boosting, for kite foiling, it's amazing. Like the Barracuda L and the M are amazing surf foils also, for the intermediate to advanced rider. So that's that use case for the Barracuda. The Marlins are sort of like mid-aspect, like high mid-aspect, high performance front wings. These are mainly geared towards wing foiling. And the small sizes are also very good for kite foiling. What makes the Marlin really good for like wave riding is that it's a little bit more compact shaping. You don't have as much span. The power development compared to the Barracuda is very linear. The Barracuda is very progressive, which means it starts slow, but as you kick it, it actually comes up quite aggressively. Yeah? So especially if you're doing bottom turns and so on, you get that sort of slow entry and fast exit, sort of more surf style, let's say that. And whereas the Marlin has this very linear turn. So it basically how much energy you put in, it doesn't sort of kick out or accelerate. It sort of goes through that turn very controlled. So especially when you're riding very fast in breaking waves, it gives you a very confident feeling and a lot of control by having that sort of linear power development. For freestyle, it is great because you have less span. It's easier to land something that is not so high aspect, but it's still high performance enough to have that speed for that pop on the takeoff. So that's especially like from the S size down is exceptionally good for freestyle riding. And next step, not even a step down, it's the next range along is the Condor range. The Condor is our high performance pump foiling range. The big one, which is the Condor XL, is actually not in a monoblock construction. That's actually still in the HP construction, because that was the first one that came out. And its two smaller brothers, the M and the S, are in monoblock constructions. These are designed for pump foiling, for dock starting. The Condor XL is the one that holds the world record for longest time pumped, 4 hours and I think 11 minutes is the actual time at the moment set by Nicholas. And then the Condor M is sort of like a nice sort of step forward. If it's not so much about long distance pumping, it's more about an easy start and having a little bit more agility than the Condor XL. And then the Condor S is for those lighter riders or very advanced pump foilers which want a little bit more speed, a lot of agilities. These guys that love carving, wake thieving, and so on like that, or also wake foiling behind the boat. The Condor S is like the sweet little foil for that. And then in the HP range, we also have the Mantas. The Mantas is the Manta XL is actually the old 1396P. That's an amazing beginner dock starting foil. It's very controllable, very easy. It makes learning how to dock start like a no-brainer. Like it's if you want to learn the dock start, that's the front wing you want. And that, if you look at the complete kit, is paired with the Manta L stabilizer, which is a pure beginner stabilizer for pump foiling. It's very rounded. There's no sharp edges on it whatsoever. We went for a little bit thicker trailing edge because the sort of paradox is typically it's not the front wing that injures you. When you fall on your foil, it's typically the stabilizer that is the one that causes any damage to you, like your foot, or if you land on it with your chest or something. So you spent a lot of time making that stabilizer extremely safe. So if you're looking at like a dock starting beginner package, the Manta XL is the one we specifically designed for that. And then we have the rides, the XL, the L, and the M. Those are the old MAR foils, which we now continue with the new updated graphics and so on, but it's the same easy to use front wing that the MAR were.
And finally, we spoke about how sometimes could be difficult to understand the best hydrofoil for each scope, and for this reason we showed a very interesting tool which is present on the Indiana website, which is called Board and Hydrofoil Finder.
One of the typical questions that the people and our subscriber asks me is which hydrofoil should I buy? I need to do this, which hydrofoil should I buy? And unfortunately, we will speak it later, but since the hydrofoil topic is not so easy, because you cannot say only, or at least now in the 2025, you cannot say only start with 2000 square centimeter for winging, because there are wings that will work best with winging, other that will not work. So it's more complex than what it seems. And I have to say that I had a look here on from your website. I think that you arrived here. Is a board finder, and it is really made very, very, very good. I like it a lot, because here I can select the sport wing. I can select okay, in this case, a complete set, beginner, advanced, pro, and simply by these buttons here I see all the options that you, let's say, somehow automatically offer, and it works really fine. I mean, it's really, in my opinion, useful for the people that need to choose the hydrofoil and need to understand which is the one. And also I noticed that you define for this hydrofoil the level, no? So which is the expertise needed. So beginner, advanced, professional, and also some more detailed data about the characteristic of the hydrofoil. And honestly, I was already happy having a look to this. Then I selected this one, selection based on performance and agility, and I found out that I can also do the choice selecting let's say the different criteria based on max speed, pumpability, low takeoff. So if I want a front that pump very well, here I have all the selection which is already made by you. So honestly speaking, I think that it is the first time, honestly, that I see a so smart tool on a website, and I need to say congratulations to you, because it's very useful for a lot of people, because the hydrofoil product are a lot. And then we will have the stub, but I have here a stub, then I will ask you some questions also about the stub.
Guys, the video is finished. I hope that you appreciated it and that you also learned something useful from this session. You find anyhow the complete live session in our YouTube channel, and here you find the video. If you like our content and if you want to see more and more live session and more video on Sport al Centro, please think to like and subscribe to the channel. Now we go and prepare other videos. Bye guys!